Good day. Today I want to talk a little bit about using the distance between the camera and the subject as a creative element in your product photography or your e-commerce photography. So the basic rule is kind of simple. If you get closer to a subject, you will get a more dynamic perspective. If you move further away from the subject, it will become a little bit more neutral, a little bit more compressed, a little bit flatter. A little bit more boring perhaps, but also maybe a little bit more neutral. So here you have the same shoe photographed um, on the same day with the same camera, but with a different lens and from a different distance. So on the left, we have a shot taken with an 85 millimeter lens from 114 centimeters away. I measured it. I'm not guessing these things. On the right, you have a shoe that is approximately the same size in the frame, but it's shot with a 50 millimeter lens, and obviously to get that effect you have to move closer to the subject. And in this case the distance was, again I measured this, 76.5 centimeters. So there you have it. um, well, what's the difference, you might ask? Well, really, let's flick back and forth between the two. Do you see how the shape of the shoe is changing? The 85 millimeter shot to me looks like a more neutral shot. The shoe looks kind of, well, it is straight, of course. It's a straight shoe. All the lines are kind of, you know, nice and straight. If you go to the 50 millimeter, it looks like everything is a little bit more curvy. The shoe looks a little bit stretched. Um, there are a couple of lines that look a little bit more curved. So maybe I should show that in Photoshop if I can. So this is the 50 millimeter and this is the 85 millimeter lens. So if you look at a couple of lines, just give me a brush. So I think what I want to look at is this line and then this line. If you look at the 50 millimeter shot, I think this curve is a little bit more pronounced. And then we also have a little bit more curvature there. So I think those are the differences between these two shots. And that is simply by changing the distance between the camera and the subject. So you get closer here and you get a more dynamic shot. Of course, you also have to change the lens. But the lens doesn't change the perspective. Don't be fooled by thinking that changing the lens is enough to change the perspective. You also have to move your camera. And to prove that point, you see I was prepared. I took a shot from the same distance, 114 centimeters, as the first shot with the 85 millimeter lens, but I just changed the lens to a 50 millimeter lens. And the shape of the shoe is exactly the same, but it's smaller because I'm using a 50 millimeter lens, and focal length just gives you a level of magnification. 50 millimeters gives you less magnification than 85. So if you bring in that shoe in Photoshop, I can show you by just copying this layer into this one, I think. There we go. So now we have two layers. And if I reduce the opacity so I can see what I'm doing, I can change the size of this. So that's just the magnification. Got to be a little bit careful now. There you go. The shoe, the size, sorry, the shape. Okay, so it's a little bit misaligned. Something like that maybe. But you can see that the shape of the shoe is exactly the same. It's not stretched. It's not curved. Everything looks the same. So if you want a certain effect in terms of making a product look more dynamic, you have to move closer. And if you move closer, maybe you have to change the lens as well. If you want to make the product look more neutral, so to speak, or more, you know, uh, yeah, neutral or whatever, another word that also means neutral but is different letters, um, then you have to move further away. And if you move further away, then, well, if you have a camera with 100 million pixels, it doesn't matter. You just crop it, just go like this, and you have the same shot as what you have here, and you're done. But if you don't have a million pixels, then maybe you want to change the lens from a 50 to an 85 or from a 50 to a 105 or something like that. So that's it. Basic rule in photography: changing the distance between the camera and the subject changes the perspective. So you can use that to your advantage, depending on whether you want to have a dynamic looking photo or product, or a more neutral looking product, a little bit flatter, a little bit more boring, um, maybe a little bit more accurate. Um, and if you want to change the level of magnification, that's where the lens comes in. The lens itself, changing from one focal length to another focal length, doesn't change the perspective. All right. So with that, thank you very much for watching, and see you the next time. Bye bye.